The night began with a reservation that had taken a month to land and ended with a silence that felt older than the city. I am Marcus Hale. I build security systems for a living and spend most days teaching careless code how to respect doors. On our 6th anniversary, I left the office early, ironed a shirt until the lines agreed to lie down, and walked to a restaurant that believes soft light can heal anything. My wife Avery chose the place. She had sent me a message at noon with a heart and a promise to be on time. I read the message twice and told myself that faith is a muscle that needs work if it is going to carry weight. The host led me to a corner table with a view of the bar and a mirror that had watched decades of people explain themselves to one another. I ordered water and a small plate to keep my hands obedient. Couples filled the room with the sound of plans. A quartet near the window tried to be quiet and failed, and I forgave them because ambition has always been noisy. I checked the time, then my pulse, then the door. 10 minutes. 15. 20. The waiter arrived with a grin meant to calm rich people. I told him I was happy to wait. He drifted away like a careful boat. Avery texted that she was parking and would be inside soon. I looked toward the entrance and saw Noah instead. Noah Reed is her oldest friend, the person who always manages to make his arrival feel like a favor. He runs a small studio and sells charm with invoices attached. He wore a jacket that wanted to be photographed. He spoke to the host and pointed toward the bar. The host nodded. Noah checked his phone and smiled the way people smile when they believe they have arranged the world in their image. He took a seat at the bar and ordered 2 drinks. The second drink sat in front of the empty stool to his left. The bartender nodded at the empty stool as if it had a name. Live music slid across the room, and the mirror watched everyone. Avery entered 10 minutes later through the side door that feeds the lounge. She did not look for me. She moved like a person who knows where the right gaze will be waiting. She walked to Noah and kissed the air near his cheek, then sat. Laughter folded around them. He touched her wrist. She lifted her glass. Their heads moved close. I felt a quiet click inside me that reminded me of a deadbolt. It did not feel like rage. It felt like alignment. The story I had refused to outline had decided to write itself in front of a mirror that could see every angle at once. I did not stand. I did not wave. I did not throw a ring or a tantrum or a plate. I watched the bartender drop a receipt, watched Noah sign, watched Avery tuck a stray hair behind her ear the way she does when she wants to signal yes without using words. I raised my phone to take a live photo of the dessert display because I collect small pleasures when the day tries to run me over. The mirror gave me a gift in the background of the frame. 2 familiar shapes close together. His hand on the chain at her neck, as if testing the clasp. Light caught the chain like a confession. I lowered the phone, breathed, and looked at the door again. The waiter drifted back, and I told him that I needed to step out and would return. I left by the front and rounded the block to the garage that sits behind the building. A valet stand faced the ramp, busy with couples who prefer convenience to principle. I asked the attendant if he could confirm when a certain plate had arrived. He said he could not share info, and then softened when I handed him my card and explained that my wife might be in danger. The word danger has more than one job in a city. He checked the log and told me a compact gray sedan registered to Avery had cleared the ticket 20 minutes earlier and had turned left into the row reserved for long stays. I thanked him and tipped in cash because cash still speaks a dialect that humans respect. I walked to the alley and stood in the shadow between a delivery door and a mural painted by someone who believes in birds with human faces. I listened. A back entrance opened once and closed. A smoker coughed and apologized to no one. My heart slowed. I am good at logs because logs are honest. The world leaves prints for anyone who bothers to capture them. I took several photos of the surrounding cameras and checked the angles. The hallway that leads from the lounge to the garage keeps a camera because people who drink near expensive cars need to be reminded that the world does not trust them. I made a note to ask for footage if this turned into paper. I returned to the dining room from another door and found my seat still waiting like a loyal dog. I ordered dinner and ate half of it. The waiter asked if everything was all right. I said it was a busy night. He nodded with the kindness of a professional who has heard every version of the human experiment. I sent a message to Avery that said our table is ready. She wrote back that she had been delayed and that we should reschedule for later in the week. I replied, okay, and then placed the phone face down on the napkin as if I had placed a coin on a grave. Noah and Avery left through the side door an hour later. He carried a small bag from the boutique in the lobby that sells gifts to people who want to pretend that money can fix preference. They moved close and slow. I waited 5 minutes and then stood, paid, and left a tip that said, "Thank you for not making me perform." On the sidewalk, I walked east under string lights that tried to turn streets into festivals. I rounded the corner to the garage and watched them at a distance as the valet brought Noah a sleek black car that he does not own. He signed. He opened the passenger door. Avery slid in. The car idled and then slid into the night with the confidence of a liar who thinks lies are a form of art. I took a train home because trains calm me. Steel on steel, a map, a schedule, a promise to stop where it says it will. I sat by the window and let the city lay out its tired grid. I thought about the stories people tell about men who catch their wives and break. I am not that man. I am a clerk of facts. I am a builder of systems. My anger does not own me. It rents a room and pays on time and does not get to move furniture. By the time I reached our neighborhood, the anger had burned down into heat that could be used for cooking. At home, Enos opened my laptop and began a file named Timeline. I wrote down the time I had arrived at the restaurant, the time Avery had entered, the time Noah had entered, the time of the drinks, the time the valet log showed the car entering the garage, the time the black car left. I attached the live photo of the dessert case and noted the reflection. I took a picture of the mirror in the restaurant from their website and marked the angle that made the reflection possible. I did not guess. I did not write adjectives. I wrote what I knew and left blanks where I wanted knowledge to stand later. I slept in the guest room and left the door open so the house could breathe. Avery came in at 2 and moved through the hall like a person who had rehearsed her story. She did not come to the guest room. She did not come to the kitchen. She went straight to the shower and ran it longer than needed. In the morning, she made coffee and kissed my cheek. She said she was sorry she had missed dinner and that she would make it up to me. I agreed. People argue with their mouths. I negotiate with evidence. Negotiation requires patience and a folder. At noon, I called Petra, the lawyer who saved a friend of mine from a divorce that tried to turn his life into a bonfire. Petra answers the phone like a lighthouse. Calm, on. She asked me to tell her what I knew. I told her about the night, the drinks, the valet log, the car, the live photo. She asked whether I had any reason to believe company resources were involved. I told her about Noah and his studio and the black car that looked like it belonged to a corporate lease. She told me to hold steady and gather what could be gathered without trespassing. She told me to move all communication with Avery into writing and to maintain civility. She told me that if this became a divorce, we would ask for a constructive trust over marital funds used for the affair. She told me not to turn the internet into a field of battle. She said battles fought for views seldom help people who want to sleep. I called the restaurant and asked whether someone from management could contact me regarding the anniversary booking that had not gone as planned. The manager called back and apologized for the missed experience and offered a credit. I thanked him and asked whether the lounge camera footage is preserved and whether a police request would be honored if ever necessary. He said the hotel takes privacy seriously and that they respond to lawful requests. I told him that would not be necessary unless the situation escalated. Sometimes you let people know that the light exists without turning it on. Darkness acts differently when it knows a switch is nearby. The valet stand provided a printed copy of the log for the evening after I returned with my own car ticket and a tip that spoke with respect. The log showed plate numbers, times, and initials. Noah's signature on the outbound matched other signatures attached to him elsewhere. I thanked the attendant and told him that discretion is a currency more valuable than tips. He nodded as if I had told him the weather. At home, I photographed the log and placed it in the timeline. I added screenshots of our joint card statements for the last 6 months, filtered for hotels, lounges, and retail on that block, and 2 nearby blocks. I wrote a small script to pull out transactions that hit after 10 in the evening on weeknights, when Avery had said she was working late. The script returned dates that matched trips Noah had bragged about on social media. People who love attention often tell on themselves. I captured those posts. I did not add snark. I added timestamps. I kept living. Work continued. My team pushed a patch that closed a small hole in a vendor library that had been letting a trickle of noise through our firewall logs. My manager thanked me for the write-up. I ate lunch at my desk and did not mention that my life had a new ticket in the backlog. After work, I ran along the river and let my legs buy me an hour of mental quiet. When I returned home, Avery asked whether I wanted to watch a show. I said I needed to finish a report and would join her later. She went to the living room and laughed at scenes I could not see. I typed. 2 days later, I staged the confrontation. Not the kind that wins likes. The kind that ends confusion. I chose the location where Avery likes to believe she is adored. A private dining room at a small wine bar that she uses for client celebrations. I called and reserved the room for 4. I invited Avery and Noah with a message that said, I wanted to thank them for helping with an issue at the office. They confirmed because praise is a magnet, and because a person who has built their personality on applause cannot resist a room with a captive audience. I also invited a friend named Lena, who manages contracts for a large firm and has the calm of a person who reads policy manuals for sport. I asked her to sit quietly at the end of the table and take notes without drawing attention. I was not trying to ambush. I was building a record. Witnesses are gravity. The afternoon of the meeting, I printed the timeline and placed it in 2 slim folders. I included the valet log, the captured posts, the card statements, and the live photo with an inset showing the reflection. I included a short letter that said that I would be filing for divorce and that counsel would contact them for constructive trust recovery regarding any marital waste. I did not mention HR. I did not need to. It waited inside the next envelope, the one I would mail tomorrow if the evening made it necessary. They arrived on time because vanity respects schedules. Avery wore the dress she uses when she wants to negotiate with men who believe texture equals authority. Noah wore a grin. He shook Lena's hand and failed to hide confusion. We ordered water. The server left. I spoke. I said I had invited them to thank them for clarifying for me the story of my marriage. I said the last week had provided me with a better understanding of how certain nights had been allocated. I said I held in my hand a timeline that should end the need for creative dialogue. I slid the folders across the table. They opened them. They read. Noah went pale in the confident way that rich boys go pale. Avery went still like a deer that has finally realized the headlights did not arrive to be admired. I told Avery that I would be filing for divorce and that I expected honesty from this moment on. I told Noah that if any company resources had been used to further this relationship, then he had introduced a risk to his clients that they might want to know about. I told both of them that I would not be discussing this again in person. Future conversations would occur through counsel. I stood. I left. Lena followed. The server held the door and did not ask whether the evening had gone well. Professionals know how to keep rooms from becoming courts. I walked home through air that had decided to remember how to be gentle. I texted Petra a single line that said the handoff is complete. She replied with an address and a time for the next morning. I slept and did not dream, and woke with the steadiness of a man who has given the day the job it is supposed to have. Petra filed the petition. The papers moved through the clerk office without needing to perform. We asked for a temporary order to preserve assets and for a constructive trust over marital funds used for the affair. We also prepared a packet for Noah board chair with a cover note that said a contractor in their network appears to have used resources in a way that may violate policy. We did not send the packet that day. We waited. Patience is not weakness. It is a lever you can pull when gravity has lost interest in fairness. Avery wrote a long message that tried to install her as the victim of neglect. She said our marriage had grown cold. She said Noah had offered warmth. She said she had not meant to hurt me. She said the affair had begun after we had drifted apart. I replied with 2 sentences. I am filing. Counsel will contact you. She responded with anger that wore the mask of sorrow. I put the phone away and folded laundry because work is the only ritual I trust when confusion asks for a throne. Noah did not write. His studio, however, updated their website the next week with a note about an internal review of compliance with travel and perks policies. A client paused a campaign. Someone in his building told someone who told me that he had been away from the office for long meetings in which the word risk took over the conversation. I did not cheer. I went to work. I wrote code that made our systems more honest. I kept the kettle clean so morning could arrive without excuses. At the first hearing, the judge looked at the papers and at us and at the space between us. Petra spoke with the voice of someone who knows when to sit and when to push. She explained the timeline, the expenditures, the public posts, the evidence from the valet, and the live photo. Avery counsel tried to break the chain. Petra held the links. The order preserved assets and set the stage for recovery of marital waste. We would need to show more math at a later date, but the direction was clear. The room exhaled. We left. Petra smiled at me, the way surgeons smile when stitches hold. After the hearing, I stood on the courthouse steps and let the weather tell me what season it intended to be. A group of tourists wandered by and took photos with the dome. I thought about how many stories this building had swallowed whole. I thought about how many people had learned inside its walls that the truth does not need microphones if the paper is clean. I went home and made soup. I fed a friend who had come to sit in our kitchen and say nothing important in the best way a friend can. We ate. We cleaned up. We talked about a game on television that did not matter. The night felt like a room that had remembered its purpose. A week later, Avery tried a new approach. She asked to meet. I refused. She asked for a phone call. I refused. She called anyway. I did not answer. She sent a voice note. I deleted it. She sent a message that said, I would regret making this public. I forwarded it to Petra. Petra added it to a folder labeled Communications. Folders do not take sides. They only sort. Sorting is a way of greeting the future with clarity. Noah sent an emissary. A partner from his firm called Petra and asked whether there was a path that would keep this from impacting the studio. Petra said there was always a path and that it ran through restitution and policy. The partner understood. The partner asked for time. Petra gave him a week. We did not need them to hurry. Our case did not depend on their house learning manners. Time passed with the efficiency of a habit. I worked, I ran, I cooked, I slept. The city continued to be a machine that prints chances for both harm and grace. Some nights, I sat on the fire escape with tea and watched a neighbor water plants with the devotion of a monk. I made a list in my head of things that help humans survive. Tea, breathing, sturdy shoes, friends who show up with groceries and quiet, lawyers who like rules more than drama, valets who write legibly, mirrors that do not lie when asked to help. Petra collected more financial records through discovery. The card statements told a story even a bored jury would understand. Hotel charges on nights when Avery had told me she was at a client dinner. 2 airline charges linked to Noah Studio travel program with a companion code applied. A jewelry purchase that shipped to an address that matched Noah building. A series of ride shares that began and ended near his studio after midnight. We did not need to prove the heart. We only needed to prove the spending. Courts do not repair the soul. They repair ledgers and sometimes dignity. During this time, my boss asked me to present at a security conference about our new approach to anomaly detection. I accepted because work had become the rope I could hold while the river ran higher than usual. I spoke on a stage under light that tries to flatter sleep-deprived people. The talk went well. I answered questions and shook hands and felt the good tired that follows an honest day. Afterward, I walked back to the hotel under a sky that had remembered how to be kind. I slept without waking. I woke without dread. This is what healing sometimes looks like. No fireworks. Just 8 hours of quiet in a bed that does not lie to you. Avery lawyer proposed mediation. Petra asked me if I was ready to hear falsehoods delivered with confidence. I said I could sit in a room without letting my face audition for anything. We set a date. I prepared not by rehearsing comebacks, but by placing facts in order. Petra prepared by sharpening the points that would matter to a mediator. We entered a building that understands the art of seating people far enough apart that insults have to buy a ticket to travel. The mediator smiled like an uncle who has survived many Thanksgivings. He asked for opening statements. Avery spoke first. She told a story about neglect and loneliness and an accident that became a comfort. She spoke about a dead bedroom as if that were a defense for theft. Petra spoke next and placed the spending on the table like clean silverware. The mediator asked whether we could find a number that would satisfy the trust claim and allow the rest to be divided without the need to pin butterflies to cork. Petra named a number. Avery scoffed. Petra placed an envelope on the table. Inside the envelope was a copy of the hotel garage footage that the manager had provided in response to a lawful request after the hearing, along with a letter from an airline confirming the use of a companion perk tied to Noah program on a weekend he had labeled as business. There was also a printout from the jewelry store that tied the purchase to a gift message written in a tone I recognized as Avery after 2 drinks. The mediator studied the papers. Avery stared at the envelope like a traitor had come to dinner. She asked for a break. We took one. Petra and I sat in silence and ate crackers that tasted like duty. We returned. The number was accepted. The agreement took shape. For months after the settlement, I woke to a quiet house and did not know what to do with the space between walls. I filled it with habits. I lifted weights in a small room where a map of the city hung like a promise. I called my mother and let her tell me a story about a dog she had seen at the market who refused to leave a puddle because it had decided the puddle was a kingdom. I answered messages from friends with more than one word. I said yes to dinner without needing to check who else would be there. I learned that loneliness and solitude are not the same creature. One steals. One gives back with interest. Noah's studio stabilized after a few clients returned out of habit, and another few arrived because attention is a currency that never stops spinning. He sent a message through Petra that said he hoped I would not carry this forever. Petra sent back a sentence that said a ledger closes when it balances. The ledger had balanced. I did not wish him ruin. I wished him the boredom of a man who must get up each day and prove his value without borrowed drama. That is a hard life for some, but it is a decent life when you accept it. Avery moved to a smaller place across town near a dog park she had always liked. She kept the dog we had adopted years earlier because she had more flexible hours for walks. I visited the dog once under supervision and brought a new collar the color of the river on a sunny day. The dog forgave me for everything because dogs believe in wagging their way through history. I walked back to the train and let the day score itself with small triumphs. A kid learning to ride a bike. A bus driver waving at a crossing guard. A man outside a bakery laughing with a loaf under his arm as if it were a prize. On the anniversary of the night I waited at that table, I returned to the restaurant alone. I asked for the same corner seat. The host obliged. The room had a new menu and the same mirror. I ordered the same dish and a different drink and a dessert that could stand on its own name. I took a live photo of the dessert case again because I believe in rituals that remind me I am still the same person with better walls. In the reflection, I saw only other people living their lives. A woman scribbled in a notebook. A couple whispered plans for a trip. An old man ate alone with the grace of someone who does not mind the company of his own shadow. I paid. I walked home. I slept. There is a story people like to tell about revenge. They say it tastes sweet and then it rots your teeth. I did not eat revenge. I filed papers. I gathered receipts. I handed out 2 folders and left a room. The sweetness, if you can call it that, came from precision. From the way a day can be rebuilt with tasks that care about their own completion. From the way a heart can choose to be a steady drum rather than a cymbal in a song that never ends. I do not advertise this. I live it. Friends ask how I knew to stay quiet. The truth is that quiet is where I do my best work. Code does not respond to shouting. Locks do not open because you have a spectacular speech. Systems respond to method and attention. So do people, if they are honest. I am not more noble than anyone else. I simply trained my hands to do boring tasks when my mind wants spectacle. Boring tasks carry you to a shore where you can sleep. I kept the 2 slim folders for a while in a drawer that also holds my passport and a list of emergency numbers. One day I realized I had not opened the drawer in months. I opened it and looked at the folders and felt nothing beyond gratitude for the version of me who had refused to become a character in someone else's legend. I put the folders in a box with tax records and quietly retired them from daily duty. The drawer closed with a soft sound that felt like a door praising its hinges. The future is not a trophy you win by surviving a contest. It is a stack of mornings you agree to meet. I meet them now with coffee and a stretch and a small note I write to myself each night. The note usually says something simple. Be decent. Pay attention. Do not audition. Remember the river. I place the note by the kettle so that steam and ink can greet each other at dawn. I still pass Noah's studio sometimes on my way to a client. The lights glow late and the glass carries the reflections of people moving with purpose. I do not look inside for him. I keep my eyes on the sidewalk and the curb because that is where danger lives when you cross. If I see Avery in the city, I plan to nod like a citizen and keep walking. We were a chapter. The book did not end. The plot widened. The point, as far as I can tell, is not to win. It is to remain a person you would choose as a friend if you met yourself on the street. I am all right. That is the sentence I offer when people ask how I am. It is small and correct. My life is a room with a window that opens and a door that locks from the inside, and a mirror that tells the truth only when I ask. I am learning to cook better than I used to. I am learning to leave emails unread when they contain bait. I am learning to keep a spare umbrella by the door for others, and to accept one when the sky surprises me. The night the story began still visits sometimes in the hour before sleep. I let it sit for a minute, and then I ask it to go because the bed is reserved for rest and the morning has already paid the deposit. It leaves. I sleep. Morning comes. I fold the blanket. I iron a shirt. I log into a system that needs me to be calm. I remain calm. Somewhere, a valet writes a plate number with pride. Somewhere, a mirror waits for light. Somewhere, a man leaves 2 folders on a table and wanders into a night that will be kinder than he expected, because he chose to let it be. Winter found the city and pressed its cool hand against every window. I bought gloves that allow phones to listen to fingers and discovered that the point of winter is to prove you can keep moving. I ran along the river anyway and counted bridges. I chose a route that crossed 3 when I wanted humility and 5 when I wanted proof that I could still climb. At the office, I brought in a box of pastries and placed them by the whiteboard. People talked more when there was sugar in the air. I listened and felt the strange comfort that teams provide. A comfort made of shared problems and shared jokes, and a calendar that respects payday. A neighbor named Ruth began leaving books in the lobby with a note that said, "Free to a curious mind." I took a novel one week, a manual about bicycle repair the next, and a slim volume of essays the week after that. I wrote a thank you note and taped it near the mailboxes. Ruth found me in the hall and smiled like a person who has spent a lifetime understanding that generosity does not need a trumpet. We spoke about Dector hinges, and she told me to use a drop of oil only, never to flood the joint. I took the advice home, and the bedroom door returned to silence without ceremony. I tried a new recipe on a Sunday night when the wind asked people to stay inside. The stew required patience at the start and a burst of heat at the end, and it rewarded attention without punishment for small errors. While it simmered, I wrote a letter to my future self and placed it in a drawer with a date to open it a year later. The letter said to keep choosing tasks that are boring and good. It said to keep calling your mother, even when the game is on. It said to forgive the version of me who once thought that a big scene could fix a small heart. The apartment developed a rhythm that belonged to me. The kettle sang at 7. The blinds opened at 7:10. The shoe rack learned to hold only shoes that actually get worn. The sink did not collect dishes overnight because I refused to let yesterday hand garbage to today. This kind of discipline is not punishment. It is a way of telling the morning that it can trust me. At a coffee shop near the train, I met a man who builds boats in a warehouse by the river. He told me that a good hull is a set of compromises. Too light and it will fly until it does not. Too heavy and it will forgive you once and then punish you forever. I nodded and thought about marriages. He asked whether I was a sailor. I said I build code and gather logs. He laughed and said, "Then you are a sailor of a different kind." He wrote the name of his next boat on a napkin, and I wished him steady water. Petra invited me to her office for one last review after the settlement funds arrived. She wanted to confirm that I had set up separate accounts, that automatic payments had been updated, and that the constructive trust recovery had been tracked correctly for tax purposes. We went through a checklist that would have bored anyone who does not understand how peace is built. At the end, she shook my hand and said that the quiet ones always make the best records. I told her that the loud ones make the best movies. We laughed and returned to our days. I began to notice small changes in how I moved through the city. I crossed streets without staring at the cars to punish them for existing. I let people merge. I held elevator doors when I could and did not, when I could not, and did not apologize to walls for being a person with a schedule. The world looked back at me with a neutral expression. Neutral is kindness in a place where everyone is playing a private game with public rules. One evening, I received an invitation to a birthday party for a mutual friend. I considered declining because the guest list included Avery. Then I considered the way fear tries to write schedules. I went. She hugged people, and I nodded at them, and the room did not collapse. Later in the night, she crossed the floor and said that I looked well. I said I was all right. She asked whether I was seeing anyone, and I said I was seeing my work and my friends and the world, and that was plenty. She laughed and moved on. I felt nothing heavy settle in my chest. Progress can be a space where weight used to live. I started volunteering to mentor a small group of students who want to learn about security. We met on Saturdays in a classroom that smells like dry erase markers and hope. I showed them how to think like a system that wants to be safe. We broke code and then fixed it, and then wrote down what we had learned. They asked about careers, and I told them that the best jobs are the ones that pay you to practice being the person you would like to be anyway. One of them said that sounded like a luxury. I told her it is sometimes, and sometimes it is a decision. Spring arrived with a wet grin and washed the salt from the streets. I opened the windows and let the apartment rearrange its air. I took the old towels to a shelter and replaced them with ones that did not shed. I fixed a lamp and learned that cloth wire can be both safe and beautiful when you respect it. I kept a list of repairs on the fridge and crossed items off with a pen that writes smooth, dark lines. Crossing things off is a kind of medicine no doctor can prescribe, but every person can afford. Noah sent one more message through council months after the dust had settled. It said he hoped we could all move on. Petra forwarded it without comment. I deleted it without feeling a need to draft a speech. Moving on is not a treaty. It is a series of mornings where you do not bring old furniture into new rooms. I prefer new rooms that do not smell like smoke. I traveled to see my sister and her kids in a small town that forgets it has a stoplight. My niece asked if I had any cool hacks for life. I told her to brush teeth before bed, write appointments down, and never trust a person who tells you that you are overreacting to your own boundary. She said that sounded like adult talk, and I told her it is, and that she will need it sooner than she thinks. We built a kite from a kit and ran until the wind agreed to lift it. The string sang. The sun did not make any promises it could not keep. On a late summer night, I rode my bike to the lake and sat on a bench where you can see the skyline, pretend to be gentle. The water moved with the patience of a creature that has already seen every version of our mistakes. I thought about the mirror again, the one in the restaurant. I respected it. It had done its job without asking for attention. I want to be like that. Useful, quiet, exact when needed, absent when not. The landlord raised the rent by a number that made me consider leaving. I looked at the budget and decided to stay one more year. I wrote a note to the landlord thanking them for fixing the stairwell light promptly last month. People expect anger and forget courtesy. Courtesy is not surrender. It is a way to teach yourself that your dignity does not depend on winning every small contest. At work, a colleague confided that her partner had been lying about money. She asked how to proceed. I told her to write down what she knew, to pull statements, to screenshot balances, to move communication into writing. I told her to resist spectacle. She cried and said she wanted to throw his clothes into the street. I said that might feel good for 5 minutes and cost her 5 months. She nodded and made a list. I sent her Petra number later that night with a short note that said, "You deserve clean paper." A small crisis in our building led to a long night without hot water. The manager apologized. The neighbors set out coolers with bottled water, and a resident with a portable stove made coffee for the entire floor. We became a tiny village for 12 hours. When the hot water returned, we clapped for the plumber from the window, like children in a parade. It felt good to clap for a person who had delivered exactly what was needed without speech. In autumn, the trees along my running route set themselves on fire for beauty alone. I tried to match their glow with a new jacket and failed, but kept the jacket because it made me visible to drivers who love their distractions too much. I waved at a crossing guard who saluted me with the seriousness of a soldier. The ritual became part of my mornings. A salute to a stranger is a reminder that we are in this together, whether we like it or not. I kept learning to cook in a way that respected ingredients. Rice became a friend rather than a chore. Eggs learned to slide instead of stick. Vegetables began to taste like themselves instead of like the pan. I invited 2 friends for dinner, and we ate in the small space between the stove and the window, and pretended to critique the city like judges on a show about urban planning. We laughed. We washed dishes. We did not check our phones for an hour. It was the best hour of the week. On a rainy day, I opened the letter I had written to myself and read it with a smile that surprised me. I had followed my own advice more often than I had ignored it. The letter felt like a handshake from an older brother I did not have. I wrote a new one and placed it in the drawer with a date 1 year out. This time the letter asked me to take a small trip with no agenda and to speak kindly to myself about missed deadlines. I visited the courthouse once more to file a routine document and watched a young couple sit on a bench with a file between them. They did not speak. They did not touch. They stared at a middle distance that I recognized. I wanted to hand them tea and a list of the boring tasks that would help. Instead, I kept my distance and wished them a steady clerk and a judge whose face could hold patience. Some days all you can do for strangers is hold a wish in the correct shape. Winter returned, and I learned which scarf works best for wind that approaches from the lake. Work added new projects, and I found myself trusting co-workers in a way I had not before. Trust, like muscle, grows when asked to do work in small sets, with rest in between. The sets added up. The team felt stronger. I started bringing fruit on Mondays because sugar gets too much credit and fiber needs allies. A friend introduced me to someone who loves old film cameras. We walked through a market, and he taught me how to read light without a meter. We took portraits of people who agreed to sit for a moment. I developed the film at a shop that smells like chemicals and hope. The prints looked like memory. I pinned one to the wall by the desk. It shows a woman selling oranges, her hands mid-motion, her face calm. The world blurred behind her, as if it is late to its own life. I stare at it when I need to remember to slow down. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had stood up in the restaurant and shouted. Perhaps a stranger would have clapped. Perhaps a stranger would have filmed me and given the video a title that would have courted 1,000,000 eyes. Then I think about the morning after that fame. I would have woken up with more problems than before and fewer allies. I chose a smaller stage and a better night of sleep. I regret nothing. I learned that the body keeps ledgers and settles them through breath. On mornings when I filled my lungs with cold air, the balance improved. On nights when I stared at screens past midnight, the balance protested. I listen now with more respect. Small routines hold back floods. A sweep of the floor before bed. A glass of water placed on the nightstand. A note to tomorrow that says what to do first. These are the sandbags I stack against panic. Panic respects preparation. I test smoke alarms on the first weekend of each month and pretend I am practicing for the day the world will require my attention. The practice carries over. I answer calls. I return favors. I pay what I owe. I forgive small debts others owe me because carrying them would make me walk lopsided. When I iron a shirt, I think about alignment and heat and the way tension relaxes when invited by the right tools. I treat conversations the same way. Heat first, pressure next. Finish with air and a clean fold. It works more often than it fails. At night, I sometimes count lights in the buildings across the way and imagine small lives in each square of yellow. Someone teaching a child to read. Someone washing a pan. Someone deciding to write down what happened today so they do not let memory outsource the job to regret. I learned to say no to invitations that feel like obligations in costume. I learned to say yes to walks that appear to lead nowhere and end up leading to a better thought. I learned that silence in a conversation is a gift to both sides when used with care. On the subway, a busker played a tune that reminded me of a childhood summer when rain made camp in the backyard and we learned to build forts out of chairs and blankets. I smiled at the memory and let it move on without tying it to any lesson. Not every memory is a sermon. Some are just proof that joy happened. I repair what I can and call a professional for what I cannot. This rule applies to sinks and to hearts. Friends can help tighten a bolt. Lawyers can help write a letter. A therapist can help name a storm. I respect the division of labor. I stopped doom scrolling and started dawn scrolling. In the morning, I read about trees and trains and recipes. I let the mind begin with nouns that do not argue. The day behaves better when you feed it the right words at the start. I keep a small jar where I drop coins that collect in pockets. When the jar fills, I buy good coffee beans and better tea and a pastry for a stranger. The jar empties, and the world feels lighter for an hour. Then the jar begins again.